Good morning, everybody. Happy Thursday. Have an amazing show for everybody today. What do we have, Krystal?
Indeed we do. As you guys probably already know, Zohran Mamdani has shocked the establishment in New York City and nationwide. So we have some updates for you there, including Andrew Cuomo is dropping his bid. So what does this mean for the general election? And also the big freak out is on. We got the Republican freak out. We got the business CNBC freak out. We got the Democratic establishment freak out. And I'm also really excited to get Saagar's take on the whole thing and what it all means. Also, lots of news continuing to unfold with regard to Iran. The great Scott Horton is going to join us to break the latest down. The Ayatollah has emerged with a message. There's actually a press conference going on today with Pete Hegseth as the Trump administration continues to insist that those strikes were successful in obliterating Iran's nuclear program. So we will get all of those details. Also, a couple of interesting media appearances. One from Joy Reid, who dropped some real truth bombs on CNN, I guess, now that she's unshackled from MSNBC. It's interesting to watch her go. So we'll play that. And we also had a great Candace Owens clip from Piers Morgan that we will break down as well. In addition, we want to keep our eye on the fact that the one big beautiful bill is moving. President Trump is pushing for this to be passed rapidly, in spite of the fact that some Republican leaders are expressing deep concern about the political fallout of the Medicaid cuts. Also have a couple of additional interesting media segments. So Bernie Sanders joined Joe Rogan, got some clips from that. And another Joe Rogan linked segment we're going to do here. So disgraced men's lifestyle influencer, Liver King, was just arrested for making terroristic threats against Joe Rogan. So we'll break down all of that for you. It's just a wild story. He has clearly had a complete mental break at this point.
Absolutely. And for those asking what the tie-in is because this show actually was featured in the Liver King Netflix documentary at the end. And so we have to bring things even more full circle by continuing our coverage of the situation. Also, it's been a really very serious 2 weeks. So, you know, let's do something nice.
Let's lighten it up with a little terroristic
Let's lighten it up a little bit. But I mean, it's always fun to see an influencer fall from grace and in handcuffs. I'm sorry, I've been waiting for it. So
I mean, especially this guy is complete and total
He's
charlatan,
a total con artist.
But yeah, if you guys haven't watched, I watched the Netflix documentary on Liver King last night with Kyle, and I knew your monologue was in it.
Yes.
But it really was like the whole thing built.
I have not watched it.
I've only heard this monologue is like the the conclusion that wraps the whole thing up is pretty cool.
As you guys, that's why you guys watch the show. You're ahead of the curve.
There you go.
We were one of the only news channels that actually covered it at that time. And no, it wasn't for clicks. I had been fascinated by the story for quite a long time. All right, let's get to Zohran. You guys did a great job of covering all the election results live, but a lot has happened since then. So
yes, indeed. So to back up, we'll start with Zohran Mamdani, his victory speech, just to get a flavor of what he was talking about as he clinched the Democratic primary victory. Let's go ahead and take a listen to a little bit of that.
Tonight, we made history. In the words of Nelson Mandela, it always seems impossible until it is done. And I want to thank Brad Lander. Together we have shown the power of the politics of the future. As FDR said, democracy has disappeared in several other great nations. Not because the people disliked democracy, but because they had grown tired of unemployment and insecurity, of seeing their children hungry while they sat helpless in the face of government confusion and weakness. In desperation, they chose to sacrifice liberty in the hope of getting something to eat. New York, if we have made one thing clear over these past months, it is that we need not choose between the two. We can be free and we can be fed. We can demand what we deserve. And together we have built a movement where everyday New Yorkers recognize themselves in our vision of democracy.
So you get a little taste there of the talent and the rhetoric that helped to lead to this completely shocking, pretty overwhelming success here for Zohran. Let's go ahead and put this up on the screen in terms of the coalition that he built, because there are some really interesting numbers here and some really interesting things to glean. You really have to kind of discard some of the expectation was this would be, heavily leaning on white college-educated and Asian college-educated voters. The way he was able to win with such stunning, overwhelming force, and in the first round, which people didn't really expect. I mean, technically it hasn't been called yet. It's got to go to ranked choice voting, but Cuomo's already conceded. He did best in racially mixed precincts here. Cuomo did best in precincts which were either heavily white or heavily black. So in the more mixed areas of the city, that is where Mamdani did the best. Let's go ahead and put the next piece up on the screen here about the class coalition he was able to build. And Saagar, this was, to me, some of the most fascinating breakdowns that we saw were in terms of the class demographics that made up Mamdani's base. So Cuomo did the best among the very poor and among the very rich. So billionaire class, all in for Cuomo. Mamdani was strongest among the sort of broad middle, so the working class and middle class in New York City. And keep in mind, in New York City, because it is so expensive, the middle class is a little bit higher income than what it would be considered nationwide. But that's really where he had his strength. And then we don't have these numbers, but there was also obviously a massive generational divide. And that was perhaps the most significant divide in this entire race, is Mamdani was so strong with young voters and did something that, the Bernie campaign promised to do, that leftist campaigns often promise to do, which is to shift the demographics of the people who actually turn out. It appears that Zohran, in addition to winning groups that he wasn't necessarily expected to and building inroads into groups he wasn't expected to, he also did change the composition of the electorate, where it was much younger than typical New York City mayoral elections ultimately are, and that's how he's able to secure.
Yeah, it's very interesting. There's a lot of he's the real candidate of the rich and he's a candidate of the poor. Again, I would remind somebody that if you make this is going to sound crazy for people who are in Alabama. If you make $100,000 in Manhattan, you're basically rent poor. It's like you're effectively like paycheck to paycheck.
You're working class.
No, look, again, I know this sounds nuts to everybody else who lives, but if you've ever lived in New York, I mean, I'm serious, like $100,000, and you have to think about state, local, and federal, what you're left home with, and then what the average rent is for even a 1 or a 2 bedroom apartment. Good luck to you being able to even go out to eat like a couple of times. So that's my, first kind of thing. But also, at the same time, I do find the quibbling really annoying because you can kind of find a narrative wherever it is. Like, Cuomo won, the majority of black voters, and there was a big, racial split. Mamdani did very well in a lot of these mixed districts. At the end of the day, I don't think it really matters all that much. The only thing it means is winning the primary, and we will also find out during the general election what his general broad appeal is. But also, look, I mean, all of this, working class, non-working class, it's like, guys, the only thing that matters is winning. And, Donald Trump, yes, he won many working class voters, Latino voters, et cetera. He won a lot of rich people too, like middle class as well. In fact, middle class suburbanites, if they hadn't voted for Trump, he would not have won the popular vote election, right? So just taking the coalition for what it is. I mean, look, it's not a surprise. Like, the Democratic Party broadly appeals to people who are college educated. If you've been watching this show for the last 5 years, then you would know that. Like, having a 4-year bachelor college degree is one of the major signs of being liberal. It just is what it is. And so when you put that into a city like New York with one, I can't even imagine, like the median income, I believe, on the island of Manhattan is $102,000 per year. That's a median income. And then actually, if you restrict it and you leave out, I think some parts of above a certain street, it skyrockets even higher. Well, what do you think they all do? They're all highly college educated. Of course, they're Democratic voters. So yeah, I mean, we can make quite a bit of this whole working class, black or whatever. But to me, the only thing that matters is winning, and the guy won. So it doesn't really matter. At the end of the day, how he will perform in the general election is, of course, an open question. We have the news about Andrew Cuomo. Is he officially not running? It was a bit confusing.
Let's put A4 up on the screen.
Let's put it up there.
So just to explain, in New York, there are multiple ballot lines.
Yes.
And Andrew Cuomo already was going to be on one of the non-Democratic Party ballot lines for the fall. So the expectation very much was that if he lost in the Democratic primary, he would continue on to the fall. But that expectation was built at a time when it was expected either he would win or that it would be very close. It ends up not being close. In fact, the margin of victory in the first round ranked choice vote is going to only be, it's only going to grow when they actually factor in ranked choice vote, because the third place candidate, Brad Lander, cross-endorsed Mamdani, and his campaign told us that some 80 to 90% of Brad Lander votes are ultimately going to end up with Mamdani. So in the wake of that crushing defeat, humiliating, I mean, you can't even put words to it how humiliating this is for Andrew Cuomo. Then it goes, maybe he's not going to be able to continue. And in fact, it looks like, according to sources within the Cuomo camp, he is going to drop his New York City mayoral bid, in New York Post phrasing here, after blistering primary defeat to Zohran Mamdani. And I think probably one of the things that happened here, put A4B up on the screen, is that a lot of his donors started to pull the plug. They're like, you know what, dude? You got your ass kicked by a 33-year-old who came out, Democratic Socialist, Muslim, who came out of nowhere from 1% of the vote, and he beat you. And we threw $26 million in super PAC ads against this guy, and you got your butt kicked. So listen to this, though. This is remarkable. One of these big donors says, you know what, I was just backing Cuomo, not because I like the guy, but because I thought he was going to win, and he's transactional, and so I needed to make my corrupt deal. Specifically, he says, this is Mark Gordon, that he's now likely to back Mamdani. That's because of the support Mamdani got from Brad Lander, who Gordon said he ranked first, quote, I feel like people misunderstood my $250K for Cuomo for real enthusiasm. It was basically, oh, looks like Cuomo's coming back. We don't want to be shut out. Let's try and get on his good side. That's kind of how things work with Cuomo. It's sad political pragmatism. I wish we lived in a world where those sorts of things were not useful things to do. The other thing I noted, Saagar, is that Bill Clinton, who had endorsed Andrew Cuomo and even recorded a robocall for him and was, I guess, his highest profile endorsement. He also came out and said, and was wishing Zohran good luck in November. So that was an indication to me as well. But, this is the thing for Cuomo, too. Like, not only did you get humiliatingly defeated, not only did you run one of the most piss-poor campaigns that all the New York experts say they've basically ever seen anyone run, but people hate him.
Yeah.
Like, he's a terrible person. And anyone who has an opportunity to stick a knife in this guy is going to, because he is a tremendous asshole. Like, this is not breaking news. Everyone knows this about him. And so you hear the way this donor talks about him. He's like, yeah, I didn't want to get punished for not contributing to his campaign. I wanted to be able to, make whatever corrupt business deals and do my transactional politics thing. That's what my $250K investment here was. It's not because I like the guy. So that's the other piece, is because he's such an asshole, when people have the opportunity to stick the knife in, some of them are going to do it.
Absolutely. It's also just such a massive referendum here on the Democratic establishment. CNN's Harry Epton did a good job of breaking some of this down. Let's play A6, please, just to explain it.
This was a political earthquake that should have the Democratic establishment running scared. What are we talking about here? Well, New York City primary upsets like Mamdani's, this is truly one for the record books. There are really only two that I could think of that are anything like this. And that was back in '89 for mayor when David Dinkins won over three-term mayor Ed Koch. Koch was running for a fourth term. The voters said, there was big turnout then, just like there was big turnout last night. And of course, more recently, if you want to take a look at a national picture, think back to 2018, New York's 14th Democratic primary going for Congress when AOC beat House Dem Caucus Chair Joe Crowley. This, to me, is very much like that, energizing young voters, energizing voters on the left, and providing what truly was a historic night. You think about Democratic establishment, you think about Democratic Party leaders, pretty much all of them were behind Andrew Cuomo, but the bottom line is the Democratic base is fed up, done with the Democratic establishment. This is true in New York, it's true nationally. Democrats who say their party leaders should be replaced. Look at this. This is a recent poll from Reuters Ipsos. 62% of Democrats nationally say their party leaders should be replaced. Look, Democrats who identify as liberal nationally, in 1994 is 25%. You go to 2004, 33%, 2014, 43%. Now the majority of Democrats nationally identify as liberal.
So
take it to the bank. I think he's obviously correct. I mean, we've been talking about Democratic Tea Party, like this is what it is. This is the Eric Cantor loss in 2014. People being like, oh shit. Eric Cantor famously spent more at the Capitol Grill, which is a steakhouse here in Washington, on steaks than his opponent, Dave Bratt, spent on the entire campaign. Very similar,
he wasn't
you know?
even in the district.
He wasn't even there. He was
the
here.
Night that he lost to
exactly.
Dave Bratt. I mean,
this is all old Washington lore, but it's important because you can just see that these stories are as old as time. And yeah, look, I mean, we haven't even really talked about, we talked a lot about the Zohran campaign. He ran a very effective campaign.
Oh, yeah.
It was preposterous to make this thing whole about Israel. In fact, that's probably my best takeaway from this is AIPAC taking the biggest L of all time, doing second best amongst Jewish voters, but more importantly, that the PSYOPs don't work anymore. A lot of people are also waking up to it. We can talk a little bit here about the establishment reaction, but there's even a split now, like on the right, of people who are like, oh, he's Muslim, and others, even Matt Gaetz, tweeting out Zohran's video about make halal $8 again, and people are like, yeah, I wonder why this won. You know, it's again, you know, if you've never lived in New York, if you've never been to New York City, like the cost of living and inflation of literally everything is insane. Like it's insane. Even, I don't even know, in the last 10 years, every time I go back, I'm like, what? What now? I don't drink anymore. I was at a bar recently and they were like, oh, $21. I heard somebody ordered a $22 cocktail. And I was like, oh, what is that? It must be like some fancy mart. They're like, dude, this is like well vodka. I was like, what? I was like, what has happened here?
Yeah.
But that's reality. That's life, from food to halal. And just talking about that is very important. So if we want, we can move on to that and talk about some of the reactions.
Well, just two quick things. So first of all the questions about Israel actually allowed Zohran to position himself as the America First or New York First candidate, where everyone else, oh, I'm going to Israel, I'll go to Ukraine, whatever. Zohran, will you pledge to go to Israel? And he's like, I'm going to be here in New York delivering for New Yorkers. Oh, lo and behold, that's actually a pretty compelling message when, you know, they're trying to pin you down as some anti-Semite. And, you know, he also had a fantastic answer to, does Israel have a right to exist as a Jewish state? And he says, as a state with equal rights. What, you're against equal rights? That sounds to me like you're the one who needs to be explaining your worldview if that's where you are. So he handled all of that beautifully, and I think it actually turned into an asset for him, which in, you know, the city of New York, the highest Jewish population in the entire country, you know, incredibly significant vote, and he did quite well among Jewish voters. I haven't seen the official numbers of whether he won Jewish voters or Cuomo won Jewish voters, but he did very well among Jewish voters. So forget about your caricaturish idea that every Jewish person out there is hardcore committed to Netanyahu's genocide. I mean, it's preposterous. That's actually racist and anti-Semitic. So that's number one. Number two, the thing that I said on election night, and of course it remains to be seen, is this could actually be the moment that a lot of us thought the AOC moment was. And the reason for it is because of those numbers that Harry Enton put up, where the Democratic base no longer is in league and in love with the Democratic establishment. In fact, they are disgusted with them. And so that is what has changed the possibilities and created this particular landscape. So we'll see how all this plays out, but I guarantee there are going to be more primary challenges. People are going to see this. They're going to be inspired. 2028 is going to be very interesting, you know, because you no longer have the Democratic base just willing to go wherever the elite Democratic establishment tells them to go. That represents an extraordinary break of a sort that we have not seen in the Democratic Party in my lifetime. So that's number one. Number two, we can go ahead and just roll through these, Eric. We've got, you know, Bill Clinton and Chuck Schumer and Hakeem Jeffries weighing in. Hakeem Jeffries and Schumer say congratulations effectively, and they're going to meet with him. But they still haven't said they're endorsing him for the fall. This is your Democratic nominee. In the city that, you know, Schumer's obviously statewide, but Hakeem Jeffries, you know, represents a district inside of New York City. And you can't even say, like, good luck in the fall, we're behind you. This is your Democratic nominee. So to me, that's pathetic. But the fact that they even put out anything that was positive, I guess, is noteworthy. And then here's Bill Clinton. This was the one I found most noteworthy because he actually says, I'm wishing you success in November. And as I said before, he had previously been behind Cuomo. So Clinton seems to be saying, all right, I'm with you now for the fall, for whatever that's worth. I mean, as a sort of leader in the Democratic Party. Jerry Nadler, also very significant in terms of the New York congressional delegation. Jerry Nadler also happens to be Jewish, so this is important too. And he says that Zohran's victory is a seismic election that I can only compare to Barack Obama's in 2008. He also concludes by saying, I've spoken to him today about his commitment to fighting anti-Semitism. We will work with all New Yorkers to fight against all bigotry and hate. So having the direct support of Jerry Nadler, who's considered the dean of the New York congressional delegation, also significant. So just quickly before we move on to the CNBC meltdown and the Republican meltdown and all of that sort of stuff, which will be fun to get into, what's going to happen now is they'll wrap up the ranked choice voting allocation. Zohran's going to win. He'll win by a wider margin than the numbers even show right now. And then it's on to the general election. Cuomo, apparently, according to those sources, if they're to believe, is going to drop. Eric Adams, however, is still in, and then you have Curtis Sliwa, who's the sort of kooky Republican nominee, is also in. So these people, that we're going to talk about, Bill Ackman and these sorts, who are desperate for anybody but Zohran, are probably going to have to rally around Eric Adams, who is this hilarious idiot and cartoonishly corrupt, by the way. And you remember he appeared to have made some corrupt deal with the Trump administration to have his charges against him dropped. But that's kind of their last best hope. And Eric Adams is polling pathetically in the city of New York because he was a terrible mayor and, as I just mentioned, cartoonishly corrupt. I mean, the number of his aides who had to resign or were indicted over, various scandals is, I lost count at some point. So he's not exactly the, the strongest person that you would like to see if you're trying to stop Zohran, and especially with the amount of momentum that he has at this time. So listen, they're going to throw everything they can at him between now and the fall. I have no idea what sort of dirty tricks they're going to pull, but I do think he's in a fairly strong position here, especially with Cuomo now stepping aside, because Cuomo, in spite of also being scandal-ridden and obviously people not having a particularly favorable impression of him, Cuomo is still a big name in New York. Cuomo it's still a dynasty. He, had all this establishment backing behind him. And so to have him out, I think Eric Adams is an even weaker, there's no doubt about it. Eric Adams is an even weaker candidate than Andrew Cuomo was at this point.
Hey, if you like that video, hit the like button or leave a comment below. It really helps get the show to more people.
And if you'd like to get the full show ad-free and in your inbox every morning, you can sign up at breakingpoints.com.
That's right. Get the full show, help support the future of independent media at breakingpoints.com.